When I was preparing for this Sunday and reading through the lectionary, one of the challenges of preaching on the lectionary is the selected texts are not necessarily scripture you would like to talk about. There's others that might be easier or more of a favorite or something, but nonetheless, here's where we are. And stated very bluntly, as I read today's scripture from Luke, I thought to myself what any sane judge would say if this case was brought before him or her. They would rule, this is out of order. Quit wasting my time. At least that's my opinion, because, this whole thing about who are you married to when you've been married to 7 different people and which one you're going to choose for eternity, it's insane on so many levels. I can't even begin to grasp it. And there is little of what I would call or name common sense. Common sense. Why spend time on it? I guess someday we'll find out. But why spend time on it? But then, as I thought deeper, maybe it's common sense we are lacking the most these days, and common sense what we should focus on or think about. Jesus is asked in this story, by those responsible for overseeing and interpreting the oral law, if we have these deaths, which one, which marriage is going to last into eternity? I can imagine Jesus responding, almost maybe bursting out in laughter, going, seriously, this is what you want to talk about? Now, I understand in the same breath that, marriage laws are really just for the order of society. The dispensation of property, wills, health care, all those things that are in the legal realm. In fact, the country of Spain, and there are probably other countries that do this, I think maybe they do it right. When a couple wants to get married, you go first to the courthouse, you get married, sign the legal document, then if you want a blessing or a religious element, you then go to the church. It's pretty clean. Not so much in our country. But here it is. And I just wonder, what did Jesus think? I've got all these things on my mind. We have people that are living in poverty. We have people who live under the oppressive system that's been employed by the Romans, a system that's just a little bit above being a slave. And you want to waste my time on something as inconsequential as who you'll be married to in eternity. Come on, man! But it's true. That's what they wanted to do. And I think that kind of absurdity, before we blow it off too quickly, is still true today. I think we focus a lot of our time and our attention and our energy on distractions, many times intentionally planted distractions that really take us away from critically thinking about who we are, what we are, how we're going to live together, what the future will look like, and work it out. We have an obsession. We have an obsession to put into place or apply matters that, as I said, are caused to distract us. And once we do this, pay attention to this. This is the really critical issue. And everybody focuses on that. And what we do then is we pass a law and we say, okay, that's all solved. Let's move on to another distraction, which is really just a misuse of power and, if not, an outright grab to be in power, We see this a lot, not since the Scopes trials of 100 years ago about evolution, have we lived in a time when science and reason, science and common sense, science and religion have been pitted against each other. Pitted against each other, not for seeking the truth necessarily, but for seeking a position of manipulation and maneuvering of the general population. You follow what I'm saying? Or do I need to start over? We waste a lot of time on stuff that doesn't matter. It's a game politicians play. They want you to look over here rather than really thinking about the matters, what matters, the issues that matter that we have in common, that really would make a difference. And then they like to stand up, especially this time of year, and proclaim all the things they've done to save us. You know, save us from what? I looked at laws on the books in all 50 states, and for those of you, and they're always skeptics, you're welcome to have them afterwards. I tried to check them out as best I could. There are laws that you will find a bit crazy, but were once put in place and are still on the books. Why? Because they benefited somebody, or somebody thought they were important. I'll leave that part up to you. Let me pick on a state. Georgia. Anybody here from Georgia? Probably good. In the state of Georgia, in the county of Ackworth, all citizens must own a rake. It's also illegal in Georgia to use profanity in the presence of a corpse. Let me look at another one. In Delaware, it's illegal to get married on a dare. Idaho, residents may not fish while sitting on a giraffe's back. Maybe the circus was in town, I don't know. Idaho Falls, if you're 88 years of age or older, it is illegal to ride a motorcycle. Sounds like just general wisdom, probably, to me. But you know, why is it a law? Because somebody thought it was important enough to carve in stone. You see what I'm saying? It's also illegal to ride a merry-go-round on Sundays in Idaho. Back in 1924, in Indiana, a monkey was convicted in South Bend for smoking a cigarette and sentenced to pay a $25 fine in court costs. It's against the law to pass a horse on a street. Now, I was thinking about that. You know, I wonder, maybe they should have made a horse lane. I mean, that's how we do it, right? With bikes and things like that. Just make a horse lane. Let me get a couple. Anybody from Alabama? Because in Alabama, it's illegal to drive with a blindfold. In Alabama, it's illegal to wear a fake mustache that might cause people to laugh in church. It's also illegal in Alabama to put an ice cream cone in your back pocket. Alaska, it's illegal to push a live moose out of an airplane. Arizona, illegal for men and women over the age of 18 to have less than one missing tooth visible when they smile. California, you can't ride a bicycle in a swimming pool. You're not permitted to wear cowboy boots unless you already own 2 cows. It's illegal to set a mousetrap without a hunting license. You may not drive, in Colorado it says it's illegal, you may not drive a black car on Sundays. Cats in Colorado must not run loose without being fitted with a tail light. In Connecticut, it's against the law to educate a dog. In Montana, it's a felony for a wife to open her husband's mail. In Nebraska, a very wise state above others, a man is not allowed to run around with a shaved chest. A parent can be arrested if his or her child cannot hold back a burp during a church service. In New Hampshire, the law forbids you to tap your feet, nod your head, or in any way keep time to music in a tavern, a restaurant, or a cafe. I got a few more I got to go over here. Owning the Encyclopedia Britannica is illegal in Texas. That explains a lot, actually. In Texas, a recently passed anti-crime law requires criminals to give their victims 24 hours notice, either orally or in writing, and to explain the nature of the crime to be committed. It is also, you must be a Christian to hold public office in Texas. It is illegal to have windshield wipers without a windshield. Washington State, you may not ride an ugly horse. West Virginia, no member of the clergy is allowed to tell jokes or humorous stories from the pulpit during a church service. In Wisconsin, it's illegal to sell ugly cheese. Wyoming, you may not take a picture of a rabbit during the month of June. North Dakota, it's illegal to lie down and fall asleep with your shoes on. Ohio, oh, I love this. Who's from Ohio? I love Ohio jokes. There we go. It is illegal, it is an Ohio state law that it's against the law to kill a housefly within 160 feet of a church without a license. Oklahoma, this is so perfect. In Oklahoma, it's against the law to open a soda bottle without supervision of a licensed engineer. It's also illegal to read a comic book while you are operating a motor vehicle. In Oregon, ministers are forbidden from eating garlic or onions before they preach. Let's see. In Providence, Rhode Island, it's illegal to sell toothpaste and a toothbrush to the same person on a Sunday. Let's see here. Oh, here's one. Maryland. It's illegal to swear while driving. In Massachusetts, no gorilla is allowed to be in the back seat of any car. Minnesota, oh, Minnesota. It's illegal to sleep naked. In Minnesota, a wife's hair legally belongs to her husband. And she is not allowed to cut her own hair without her husband's permission. In Iowa, one-armed piano players must perform for free. In Kentucky, every citizen is required to take a shower once a year. I'm just about done here. Where is that? Florida. It's illegal to sing in public while wearing a swimsuit. It's illegal, our Florida law forbids rats to leave the ships docked in Tampa Bay. In Hialeah, ambling and strolling is a misdemeanor. And maybe this had to do with Sarasota and the circus. But in Florida, if an elephant is left tied to a parking meter, the parking fee has to be paid the same as if it were a car. It's illegal in Florida to shave naked. It's illegal in Florida to pass gas in public after 6 p.m. And lastly, in Florida, it is illegal to have any kind of a sexual relationship with a porcupine. Now, you can check those out, they're here, but I want to assure you, I didn't do it simply for laughs. There is a point, and I did try to check them out in different areas to see if they were legitimate. But, you know, we're much better at passing laws for some reason, because behind those laws was an issue that somebody was concerned about, or an agenda that somebody wanted to play out. It just boggles my mind. But that's, you know, we laugh on the one hand, and then we say our society is crazy or out of control on the other, and we point fingers at judges and attorneys who enforce these laws. They enforce them, they don't make them. Who makes them? The people. The people make these laws, and it is the people who put them in place. We either keep them or we revoke them, but it starts with us. And there are many ways that people can do this, because there's many different forms of law. There's preemptive law, there's tort law, there's property and nuisance laws, there's statutes, there's regulations, and then all the subdivisions we've created out. You don't just have a felony, a first, second, third degree. You don't just have a misdemeanor. There are all kinds of things, and they are tagged with, because we don't like what judges do, then we tag them with specific minimal and maximum punishments. And I haven't even begun to talk about really what matters is moral law, or the laws of nature. You know, when I think about the struggle the church had, the lawsuit the church had with parking out here, it's clearly an illustration of this, as a few individuals are able to use our legal system for themselves. It's not about the community. It's not about anything else. It's not about talking or working through things. It's about what I want and how I can get it, whether really it has any semblance of right or wrong. And you see, these laws are put in place because those who have the authority to do so, or those who gather enough power to put them in place, tell us, well, they're necessary to maintain order and decency. But what I want to ask is, who's asking the question, but whose order, whose sense of decency, whose idea of what society is to be alike? You know, rules develop a momentum of their own. They hit an area and they just keep rolling and rolling and rolling. And I think in our time, this has become a way to deal with matters that really in a democracy should be in the people's hand. They have gotten a momentum, and they are voraciously nourished by a rampant lust to get our own way, to advance in our own control or authority or power in a greedy fashion. And in doing so, in using the law in the legal system to that ends, we dismiss the one thing that has made our country unique and the hope and envy of the world. And that is the freedom to take ownership of our identity, to develop our thinking and work together, to allow for critically personal choices that we should be able to make on our own, because the responsibility really is ours. You know, the quote that the law doesn't determine what is right or wrong, good or bad. The law either confirms or conforms to what is right and good, or the law is wrong and bad. You know, people change, life changes. Do all these laws apply anymore? No. Maybe they need to be thought through in a better way. You see, the problem is what catches our attention for an instant, for a time, a moment, and it leads us to quick answers and oversimplified decisions so that we can say, hooray for our side, problem solved, and then move on to the next issue we think will catch people's attention, which usually somehow coincides with the election cycle. And in the process, we forget the problems that are real for all of us. And we forget that we allow this to take place, and then the problem just, the issue, the matter, the strategy just continues to feed on itself and continues to go. And we blame others for it rather than taking a little ownership ourselves. A housewife, an accountant, and a lawyer were together for lunch, and the person waiting on them they were in a conversation, and that waiter said, well, I got something for you guys to figure out. Tell me, how much is 2 + 2? Well, the housewife immediately replies, 4. The accountant sits back in the chair and says, well, you know, it's either 3 or 4. Let me run those figures through my spreadsheet. The lawyer gets up, he pulls the drapes, dims the lights, and then he whispers to those around the table, how much do you want it to be? My apologies to attorneys. Am I making any sense? In small towns in Arkansas and elsewhere, they don't discriminate. They're just passing laws that houses within certain areas of the city that are worth less than a certain amount have to be torn down and people moved. These ordinances have nothing to do with public health or safety, but they are an ill-disguised attempt to drive people of a certain nature or class out. Right now in Texas, laws incentivize people to file suits against anyone, neighbor, minister, even Uber drivers who somehow can be placed in the timeline with a woman who's exploring abortion. Which means if someone comes to my office and talks to me, I become liable for her decision, whatever. Oklahoma laws passed in mid-May provide for a civil suit against anyone related to a woman who secures an abortion care at any point after fertilization, with a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison or a $100,000 fine. Louisiana considered this and is considering currently making people legally liable if they seek an abortion because their contraception failed, and they will be charged with murder. Now that's not after so many months, so many weeks, that's the day after, so to speak. And this is where I find ourselves. It's very frustrating as a pastor because, you know, at one time we were the folks that folks came to talk to and to work through these things. But that is even being eliminated as a possibility, or at least being considered as unnecessary. We're going to solve it just by making a cut and dry law. And so we begin to dictate morality, but avoid the sensible discussion to determine what is moral. What is morality? And most importantly, how do we use our personal freedom, which is the rock bed of who we are as a country? How do we use our freedom within it in sensible ways and moral ways? When Jesus was questioned about the validity of law in his time, Jesus said to those who confronted him, I didn't come to destroy the law or the prophets. I just came to see it and apply it in a different way. in a way that sees all we are, all we hope to be, all we do, how we act towards one another, to see life itself through the eyes of compassion, forgiveness, and love. Challenging people to ask themselves, how would I want to be treated in these situations? Who loves me? Who cares for me? Rather than saying, well, we'll just deal with this quickly, one and done. And wrestling with how our society, because our society isn't always held accountable for the ways in which we contribute to the issues we face. Because those we often blame for all this stuff, whether we like it or not, they're reflections of us. They're reflections of us. Think about that. Why it goes on, why we accept it, why we don't change it, why we're afraid to say anything. Well, maybe. And that's hard. Because when you get it down to the nuts and bolts and you say, are these people reflections of me as a Christian? Or am I supposed to reflect someone else? There's something, I think, about our faith that says we're ultimately supposed to reflect who? Jesus. The old thing, what would Jesus do? How is his compassion and his love, his understanding embedded in how I think and how I dream of our world being? So if we look at, those who lead us as reflections of us, maybe we should look again. Maybe we should look again and place that reflection against what we believe would be the reflection of Christ. What would the world be like if we replaced laws with love? Amen.